Hi there. If you are someone who is new to AWS and want to get started with it, but before doing so, would love to understand what are some of the main AWS services that are being offered right now, then you are in the right place. In this video, I'm going to talk about overview of some of the key AWS services available. To start off with, we'll take a look at Amazon S3. S3 simply stands for Simple Storage Service. It's an object-based storage with a simple web service interface to store and retrieve any amount of data from anywhere on the web. Meaning it lets you upload any type of files, and once uploaded, it will give you a link to access or download that file which was stored onto S3. It can be used as primary storage for cloud native applications, as a target for backup and recovery and disaster recovery, and also with serverless computing. Objects get stored in something called as buckets. The features of S3 include it's simple, durable, and available. It's secure and scalable. It's low cost, integrated, and simple data transfer. Now, S3 offers a range of storage classes that you can choose from based on your data access, resiliency, and cost requirements. One of such storage classes is the S3 standard. Now, if you have data that you have to access frequently from your application, you can go for S3 standard, which is basically for frequently accessed data. Let's say you have a requirement where the data is not that frequently accessed, then you can go for the second one, which is the S3 standard IA, or also known as the S3 standard infrequently accessed data. The third one is one zone IA, which is one zone infrequently accessed storage class. It's similar to the standard infrequently accessed storage class. However, the difference in one zone IA is that the data is stored in only one availability zone. So in case that availability zone goes down, your data might be lost. And lastly, if you have data that you want to archive for long term, you can go for the Glacier storage class. If you are unsure which storage class to go for your storage requirements, Amazon has a new S3 intelligent tiering storage class, which reduces your storage costs by automatically moving data to the most cost effective access tier based on the access frequency without performance impact and operational overhead. Next, we take a look at another important service called EC2. It stands for Amazon Elastic Compute Cloud. It provides secure, resizable compute capacity in the cloud. It's designed to make web scale computing easier for developers. Now imagine that your organization needs to procure a new Linux server. How much time would it take? It might take days or even months. But with Amazon EC2, it reduces the time required to obtain and boot new server instances to minutes. Within minutes, you'll have a new Linux server or even a Windows server. So the benefits provided by EC2 is elastic web scale computing. It's completely controlled. It's flexible cloud hosting services. It's integrated, reliable, secure, and inexpensive. EC2 lets you define security rules which dictates who can do what. For example, let's say you have a three-tiered application wherein you have a web server, the application server, and the database server. Now you can define rules which only permits the web layer to access the app layer and app layer only to access the DB server. So these kind of rules are possible with EC2. It can also let you define security group rules wherein let's say you want to open up port 80 and 443 to the internet, meaning somebody from outside can access only port 80 and 443, which is the HTTPS port for the web server, and no other ports would be accessible. Now for the app server, let's say you want to troubleshoot some issue and the developers want to SSH into the EC2 instance to check what's going wrong. In that case, you can open up only port 22 of the app layer to open up to the developers so that they can SSH into it and check the diagnostic logs and stuff. Now, ideally for the DB server, you don't want anyone to directly log in into the DB server and do some queries. So you can prevent such access using the security group firewall. Next, we take a look at ELB, which stands for Elastic Load Balancing. Let's say you have your application running on multiple EC2 instances, and somehow you need a load balancer to balance the load across all the instances. So Elastic Load Balancer is the one which you can use. It automatically distributes incoming application traffic across multiple EC2 instances. ELB offers four types of load balancers: the classic load balancer, application load balancer, the network load balancer, and the gateway load balancer. To check out the comparisons among the four load balancers, we check the documentation site. Here is a table which gives a good differentiation between all the four. The main is the load balancer type. So the application load balancer works on layer 7. The network load balancer works at layer 4. The gateway load balancer works layer 3 gateway plus layer 4 load balancing. And the classic load balancer works on layer 4 as well as 7. The next service we take a look at is AWS Lambda. Before we understand what Lambda is, let's take a look at evolution of servers. So first came in the data center, then came in the infrastructure as a service, then came platform as a service, the containers, and lastly we have the serverless. Now what is Lambda? Lambda is a serverless compute service where you can upload your code and create a Lambda function. It lets you run code without provisioning or managing servers. Lambda runs your code in response to events. Events can be anything with as simple as a file upload to Amazon S3 or simply a message published to Amazon SQS or managed streaming for Apache Kafka. Lambda automatically scales your application by running code in response to each trigger. You pay only for the compute time you consume. There's no charge when your code is not running. The next service we take a look at is the AWS CloudFront. It is a global content delivery network or CDN service that accelerates delivery of your websites. It has a global network of edge locations. Now, let's say you are a user in some part of the world and you want to access example.com. And let's say the server for this example.com sits far away from the user in a different geography. If the user hits example.com, it will take quite some time to fetch the data from the server because the server is located very far from the user. Now, in case of CloudFront, there's something called as edge locations located close to the user. Now, again, in the same scenario, if the user hits example.com, the request would first go to the edge location, and if the data is not present there, the edge location would pass the request to the original server where the website is hosted. The object is fetched from that server and stored in the edge location, and that object is returned back to the user. Now, subsequent requests from the same user or another user for example.com would look for the object within the edge location. If the object is present, straight away it is returned back to the user instead of going again back to the original server where the website is hosted. In this way, the service accelerates the delivery of your websites. Next, we take a look at the RDS service, which is the Relational Database Service. RDS makes it easy to set up, operate, and scale a relational database in the cloud. It provides cost-efficient and resizable capacity, freeing you up to focus on your applications and business. RDS provides 6 familiar database engines to choose from. It includes Amazon Aurora, PostgreSQL, MySQL, MariaDB, Oracle, and Microsoft SQL Server. AWS provides database migration service also to easily migrate or replace existing databases to Amazon RDS. Meaning, let's say you have an on-prem database running right now. If you want to migrate that to a Amazon RDS, then AWS provides migration service to do that. The figure shows example of horizontal scaling with RDS. Now you can have multiple read replicas which are read-only copies of the master database. It's synchronized with the master database. These can be placed in a different AWS region closer to users for better performance. Now the delete, update and insert operations can happen only on the master database, not on the read replicas. Thus, you can achieve horizontal scaling with RDS. Next, we take a look at Route 53 or Route 53. It is a highly available and scalable cloud domain name system web service, meaning it handles the DNS. Route 53 or Route 53 is fully compliant with IPv6 as well. It offers domain name registration services. Let's say you want to open up a new website for yourself. You can use Route 53 for the domain name registration for that. It can monitor the health and performance of your application. It can route or route end users to the best endpoint for your application based on the geo proximity, latency, health, and other considerations. Next, let's take a look at some of the routing policies within Route 53. The first one is the simple routing policy, where the user hits the website and it goes to Route 53, and Route 53 simply routes it to the US East region. So this is a simple routing policy. Next, we have the weighted routing policy, where we have the user hitting the same URL which goes to Route 53, and now Route 53 redirects 80% of the request to US East region and 20% to the US West region. So the routing is weighted based on the region. So 80% goes to US East, 20% goes to US West. Next, we have the latency based routing policy, where let's say we have a user in Africa hitting the website which goes to Route 53, and let's say the request, if it goes to US West region, would take 45 milliseconds, and if it goes to Asia Pacific, let's say Sydney, it takes 250 milliseconds. So in this case, Route 53 will route the request to US West region because it takes lesser amount of time. So based on latency, it will route the traffic accordingly. Next, we have the geolocation routing policy. So let's say we have a user in India and another user in US, and we have US West region and Asia Pacific region. Let's say the user in India hits the website, it goes to Route 53, and the traffic is routed to Asia Pacific. Now the user in US, if he hits the URL, the Route 53 would route or redirect the request to the US West region. So in this case, based on where the location of the user is, the request would be routed accordingly. Next is a failover routing policy. So let's say we have a user hitting the same website, it goes to Route 53, and Route 53 redirects it to US West region. Everything is working fine. For some reason, let's say US West region goes down. In this case, Route 53 will redirect to US East region, and that becomes active in this case. So in case of failover, Route 53 would redirect the request to the other active region. Next, we take a look at AWS reference architecture for web application hosting. So as we see here, first we have the DNS resolution served by the Amazon Route 53 service. Then we have the CDN, which is the Amazon CloudFront. Then the resources and static content are served by Amazon S3. Then we have the elastic load balancing, which balances the load across the EC2 instances. The web servers are hosted on the multiple EC2 instances. Even the application servers here are running on EC2 instances. Then we have the auto scaling. The web servers and application servers are deployed in an auto scaling group. The auto scaling automatically adjusts your capacity up or down according to the conditions you define. With auto scaling, you can ensure that the number of Amazon EC2 instances you are increases seamlessly during the demand spikes to maintain performance and decreases automatically during demand to minimize costs. And lastly, the data is stored on the Amazon RDS instance. Next, we take a look at some other important services. Just brief about each one of these. First is the Elastic Beanstalk. So with Elastic Beanstalk, developers can upload their code and Elastic Beanstalk will go ahead and provision the auto scaling group, load balancers, EC2 instances, and so on. So the developers can only focus on the code and Elastic Beanstalk will take care of the rest. Next, we have the Lightsail, which is the virtual private server for AWS. It will provision a server for you and give you a fixed IP where you can, if it's a Windows, you can RDP, or if it's a Linux, you can SSH into it. Lightsail also provides a facility to have pre-configured application stack installed on the operating system. Next, we have the storage gateway, which is nothing but a virtual machine installed on your on-prem data center. What it will do is replicate the data back to AWS S3. Next is a VPC, which stands for Virtual Private Cloud. It's like a virtual data center where you can configure the network CIDRs, ACLs, availability zones, and lot more. Next is Elasticache, which is used for caching commonly queried stuff from the database so that access is faster. Then we have DynamoDB, which is basically the non-relational database if you want to use it within your application. Next, we have CloudWatch, which is basically for application and infrastructure monitoring or observability. Next, we have service for machine learning, and also we have IAM, which is identity and access management to control access to the AWS resources. Next, we have SNS, which is simple notification service. It lets you send notifications. And lastly, we have SQS, which is simple queue service. It is a fully managed queue service within AWS. So that was the overview of some of the key AWS services. Thanks for watching.